the world's standards, New Zealand is very tolerant of religious diversity within the context of a secular state. However, the Commission also notes an area we could do better. The use of only Christian prayers in public or state ceremonial occasions raises the question of offense to or exclusion of people of other beliefs or no religious beliefs. Historically, that offense was not serious, as the population was relatively homogeneous. While predominantly Christian, it appears not deeply religious. Since the consequences of these breaches have so far been minor, it is an issue that, perhaps understandably, does not generate much passion or concern. On the contrary, my own passion is rooted in my coming to New Zealand to escape the theocracy of the Christian right. The Christian right that is now in place in all but name, ironically, that country's founding document established the world's first secular government. Yet in my lifetime, I have witnessed, under God placed in our Pledge of Allegiance in 1954, the next year, "In God We Trust," was stamped on our money and mandated as our motto the following year. These violations of the Constitution were excused because America was in a Cold War against godless communism. In the last 30 years, I've watched the Christian right build on these minor breaches of separation of church and state to successfully rewrite history in an attempt to put God in the Constitution. I say successfully because 2/3 of Americans now believe the word God is found in the Constitution, or that the founders implied it. It is not. They did not. I say successfully because the Supreme Court was the last branch of government defending American freedom of and from religion. That is no longer true. In 2005, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia stated in a minority opinion concerning a display of the Ten Commandments in a courthouse that the Constitution permits this because of its disregard of polytheists and believers in unconcerned deities, just as it permits the disregard of devout atheists. The Constitution permits no such thing. I say successfully because in a similar case decided the same day, Justice Stephen Breyer switched his vote against displaying the Ten Commandments in the first case to for displaying them in the second. His reason? They'd been there 40 years instead of only 6. He accepted the common argument that custom, rather than law, excuses breaching the wall between church and state. An argument used similarly in New Zealand. I say successfully because of the appointment of John Roberts as Chief Justice. He argued while Solicitor General before the Supreme Court that it should recognize the nation's religious heritage in church-state cases. Brian Tamaki and he would make good mates. I say successfully because the last appointee to the Supreme Court, Samuel Alito, gives a majority on the court to those hostile to the secular state the Constitution established. To make matters worse, this majority believes in a strong executive branch. When that executive is George W. Bush, a conservative Christian who stated God told him to invade Iraq, one can only conclude that the Christian right is now in charge. The U.S. is officially a theocracy. This is why I left. I came to New Zealand seeking freedom from a religion that empowers a government that sees God's will in making perpetual war, unashamedly condones torture, justifies illegal wiretapping on its citizens without embarrassment, arrogantly abrogates international treaties, denies basic human rights and civil liberties as if the Magna Carta and the U.S. Bill of Rights were merely suggestions, disenfranchises its opponents with callous premeditation, and ravages the environment with impunity. I came here to escape a religion that thinks such a government is worthy of support and that intelligent design is worthy of a science class and nature's calamities are God's judgment against non-Christians or Christians not of their persuasion. I came here to escape a religion that believes God only blesses America. My Christian faith is not their faith, nor was it the faith of the framers of the Constitution. John Adams in 1817 once observed about such as the Christian right, quote, "What a mercy it is that these people cannot whip and prop and pillory and roast as yet in the U.S. If they could, they would," end quote. How prescient. They now can and do or support those who do. There are signs in this political season that Americans have had enough of the Christian right. Thankfully, their influence seems to be on the wane. While there is some comfort in this, those on the Supreme Court will be there long after a new president and more progressive Congress are elected and have moved on. Religion will remain a potent force in American politics, even if Americans don't choose Mike Huckabee, a Baptist preacher who doesn't believe in evolution. America may elect its first black or woman president in November, but I seriously doubt, because of the role of religion in politics, it will never elect an atheist president. In America, faith has always been at the heart of politics, be the faith progressive or conservative. Huckabee clearly is going after those holding evangelical beliefs. Hillary, a mainstream Methodist, makes sure everyone can see her faith credentials on her sleeve. A Democrat can't win the general election without them. Obama, a member of the most progressive Christian denomination, speaks in a secular language of his Christian belief in the hope that people and nations can be better. McCain, the least religious of the final four, knows he must pander to the values of the Christian right if he is to have any chance of being elected. On the other hand, Helen Clark, as remarkable as she is, as an atheist, would never get past the Iowa primary. Which brings me to my last point. While a secular state is essential to respecting individual faith and belief in our increasingly diverse society, it is also necessary because faith and politics are and will be forever entwined. They are so enmeshed, they could never be separated. Wishing it were otherwise will not change it. Politics is the action arm of faith and belief. Politics at its best is a marketplace of competing ideas. Those ideals are inextricably tied to the beliefs of the one arguing for a particular action, be that person Richard Dawkins or Osama bin Laden. For those of us unhappy with the ideas conservatives and fundamentalists promote, progressive Christians, humanists, and rationalists must continue to argue, and argue forcefully for the values we hold in common. You might be surprised to know that progressive Christians hold more in common with rationalists and humanists than they do with their co-religionists. If we have a difference, it might be over the rationalist requirement for evidence to support belief. While you might reject any value or belief that can't be supported by evidence, how many of our commonly held values are supported by evidence? On what evidence do we base our adherence to the values of empathy, fairness, justice, and equality? What evidence supports our faith in our ability to make a better world? We have other commonly held views. We both affirm the positive possibilities of life without evidence. We both hold certain things, like the natural world, sacred. We share the conviction that some things are greater than the individual, whether it's a higher being or a sense of awe and connection with the world and the beings in it. Granted, faith does, can, and has led to intolerance and much worse. But is faith the blame or the triumph of the baser instincts within individuals? Certainly secular powers have also committed their share of atrocities. But again, is secularism to blame? I don't think so. American rationalist Bruce Budner outlines that it is not impossible for progressives